Oh, hello. Um, hello. I've got the chaos of my kids' breakfasts in the background, and their multiple advent calendar debris, which I'm just now realizing is all there. So awesome. And I'm just gonna check my sound real quick and just see. All right, there's sound coming through. So yeah, I just wanted to jump on and talk about a concept that's kind of new to me that's been rattling around in my head. I read an article by Luke Burgess, who is somebody I follow on Twitter, and I also saw a book, a novel, short novel title about this, and it's the concept of anti-memesis. Um, Mimesis, my entire experience with the term mimesis comes from basically reading René Girard and listening to people talk about René Girard. It's basically the idea that we mirror each other, we copy each other, and that a ton of human behavior is based off of this almost unconscious mirroring of each other, and so many of our desires, and so many of the things that cause us to do wrong and to do harm, as well as to do good, I assume, come from this mimetic way of interacting with the world, kind of a mimetic consciousness. The Bible says, um, uh, you know, now we see things as through a mirror dimly or through a glass darkly, then we shall see each other face to face. And the idea is right now, even our experience with God is to some degree a mirror of ourselves, probably to a very large degree. And our experience with other people is also a mirroring effect. So it's a handy mimesis is a handy concept because just knowing about it can help us to recognize the sort of toxic quality of that mirroring, and recognize the fact that it can definitely lead us to um, really great fallacies and even evil. And part of the idea is from René Girard is that we end up scapegoating, we end up using basically ritual violence and singling out the other, um, as part of this whole mimesis thing. We copy each other, and you see it all the time in society, whether we're looking at the far left or the far right. The extremes seem to show it the most, but you see people mirroring what goes on. You see hateful rhetoric that pushes the boundary of hateful rhetoric, and then you see people falling in line behind that. And if you're not part of that ideology or whatever, it's shocking. You're like, how can people, like for me, it's Matt Walsh and his really hateful stuff that he spews. And if you agree with Matt Walsh, don't let this throw you off. But it's not what he believes, it's the level of harshness. And then you see, I believe it's a mimetic effect. You see people who would have never been so harsh just upping their level just a little bit. And obviously, the same thing is happening on the far left as well. And I didn't mean to make this political, so I don't want to get mired down in that. But um, then this concept has recently come across my mental space of anti-memesis, which is like uh, it's the opposite of mimesis. So actually, another level of the term mimesis is that it is it's another variant of where we get meme from, and the idea is a meme. There's like biological memes, and that's Richard Dawkins. But we've all experienced obviously online memes, these kind of viral um, images and videos that take on a life of their own, that really catch fire. It seems like the mass consciousness was so prepared for this particular thing, no matter how random it might be, that it will just, reach millions and millions of people. Um, and I think that we have incorrectly or unwisely ascribed virtue to mimetic, um, like mimetic virility, like viral, the viral quality of memes. And I think those who want to be a light in the world, those who want to uh, help the situation, could be tempted to feel that um, the answer is to make righteous memes, you know, and I'm not specifically saying that that's not a good thing, that we shouldn't make righteous memes. If a meme were to catch on that genuinely espoused some important human principle, obviously I don't object to that. But the problem is, in my view, we cannot let the idea of memes and mimetic copying and viral acceptance of ideas. Um, we cannot let that guide us too much. In fact, that seems to be, in a way, the easy path. Um, it's much more difficult, like to to recognize that the ideas that are actually needed to change the world and to start um, at least mitigating the polarization, dehumanization that's happening across the board in all ideologies, is concepts that are anti-memetic. It's concepts that um, specifically resist viral fame. Like something in the idea itself is anti-memetic. And one of them came to mind for me today, and based on some other tweets. Twitter stimulates a lot of thoughts for me, as much as it can also be such a toxic thing. It has led. I've got some really interesting people that I talk to on Twitter. So the anti-memetic concept that I thought of, that I think is actually crucial for uh, righteousness, as much as, like, okay, so I'm not going to say you can't be righteous without believing what I'm about to say, but I think it's an idea that would help anyone uh, to understand righteousness better. And yeah, and I don't even necessarily think righteousness is always uh, purely a matter of understanding. I don't think righteousness in the world is reserved for the intelligent, or reserved for the intellectuals or the academics. Far from it, as a matter of fact. Um, but the concept that I wanted to put forward, this anti-memetic concept, is the concept of the false duality that has developed between real and metaphorical. And so I guess this is a little bit of a shift. So the first part of this video, which I'm trying to keep short, is telling the definition of mimesis and mimetic things and memes that informed me. So if I'm incorrect, please argue with me. And now we're going to get on to an actual anti-memetic concept. So many people, in dealing with the Bible for my whole life, basically, almost everyone has divided into two camps. There are those who believe the Bible is literal, historical, and those who believe the Bible is metaphorical. Now, to be fair, I don't think anyone in the metaphorical camp believes that there's zero history, zero literal truth in the Bible. I certainly am in some gray area in the middle at this point. I'm not saying that I will always be there or that I will stay there. But, you know, those who believe that the greatest benefits of the Bible come from its metaphorical content, usually do believe there's a historical element, but they're just not necessarily believing that the Bible is like a literal truth and sola scriptura, absolute truth. But I think that duality is really harming. Well, it's harming Christianity, but it's also harming the specific search for wisdom in the Bible. And the search for wisdom in the biblical narratives is something that touches far more than just Christians, right? Like it's so baked into our consciousness as Western people, that I really think there are a lot of people who could still benefit from learning to find the truth in the scriptures without ever becoming a Christian, as though, becoming a Christian is such a strange concept. And if I believe in it at all, I believe it's a lifelong process. So basically, this concept that you have to see the Bible as either true or metaphorical is actually based on a very materialistic read of life. In other words, when I think about the passion of Christ, if I think about Christ's life, death, and resurrection, um, and I think about it as a metaphor. See, this is where things become difficult to explain. Um, I don't know what I personally believe about, and I've got a whole video on this interview video with Paul Vanderklay about the physical resurrection. But my long-term wrestling with this concept has landed me in another camp, which is that basically, rather than metaphors and rather than mythology, in the sense of false narratives that prove a real truth, I think that reality is fractal, and that we as humans and history itself are fractal reflections of bigger truths, and that they are basically the governing, like the same principles of coherence and the same sort of almost cellular or even lower than cellular processes and forces that create, that use our genetics to create the various parts of our bodies in this kind of mysterious process with their morphic fields and all of that, is happening in society. It's happening in history. It's happening in our minds. And this is an anti-memetic concept, because what I'm trying to actually do is obscure the literalness of things like the biblical stories and the resurrection and all kinds of things. I'm trying to say that what is needed is an unfocusing of the eyes. What is needed is to take some things out of the realm of certainty, to put them in the realm of consideration, to allow a truth to be more than metaphorical and less than dead literalness. You know what I mean? Well, do you know what I mean? Do I know what I mean? I'm basically advocating for a return to some kind of mystery in theology, a mystery in our beliefs, um, and sort of a yeah. I want to undermine the concept of applying materialist principles to these fundamental stories. These stories that for many of us constitute the ground of our thinking. Like for me, there's no untangling uh, the the scriptures from my consciousness. I know not everyone is like that, but even people who don't weren't as steeped in it as I was are still steeped in Christianity, probably more than they know. And so I'm not necessarily trying to force the idea of this other category, this not literal, and I really do think that thinking of things like Christ's resurrection as an absolute hard um, literal truth. It's not like it's bad, but people act like that is the highest level of truth, and I don't think that that is actually the highest level of truth. And so I'm sort of advocating for this third category, not metaphorical, not dead material, but you can see how this is an anti-memetic principle. You can see how anyone with a sense of understanding, anyone who takes great comfort in their sense of grounding in a literal truth, and that's most people, is going to balk at the idea of moving a literal truth just out of that space, even conceptually, and embracing a certain amount of uncertainty in search of wisdom. That's anti-memetic. And that is, I think, the type of thinking, even if you don't agree with this particular example, that's the type of thinking that I believe that is required of religious people or anyone seeking to be righteous. In other words, righteousness is kind of a tricky thing, but if you're seeking to be a person who embodies the good and works for the good in a way that is obvious to others, the idea of mimetic truth, the idea of truth that catches fire and goes through like wildfire through the culture and packs out stadiums to hear what you have to say, is only ever going to be a small part. And to be honest, I think we've tried that experiment enough to know that it's very dubious. It's these more obscuring concepts, these concepts that force you to slow down, that kind of mire your thinking or add a certain layer of mist, to the landscape of your mind, that might end up kind of saving us, that might end up pointing the way, because the mimetic side will only ever be a part of the picture, and you know human beings set up structures that reify and deify what they already think. And I believe the example of Christ was to come in and question these things, was to obscure. I mean, Christ openly obscured his message often. Clarity and viral fame were something that he specifically resisted. And I think, whether you believe in Christ or not, I think that is an example that we have to follow today. We have to embrace the fuzzy. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't try to have clarity. We should always be seeking clarity. Um, but when it comes to righteousness, that clarity, when the clarity about the ultimate issues obscures our ability to see and hear and feel with and live with people now, I think we've gone too far, and I think that's where we're at. Something that comes to mind often is the passage, Jesus wept. Um, and biblical. Okay, I'm gonna try to recount it without looking it up because I don't want to make this take a lot longer. But biblically, the Jesus wept passage was when Jesus was coming to to raise someone from the dead. His family did not know that yet, and I believe it's his sister. Jesus meets Jesus, and her sorrow over the death of her brother is very real. She is just in the absolute throes of sorrow, and Jesus wept. And that was a situation in which Jesus knew the conclusion of the story. I mean, as far, I don't think there was any doubt in his mind. He was going to go and heal this person. But instead of getting excited about it, he actually just shared the grief with the sister. He just cried with her because his friend was sad. And so, you know, if that was the case with Christ, who knew the end of that story, basically to a certainty, how much more should we resist the dehumanization of those around us and embrace them, like, not metaphorically, literally embrace the people around us, and allow the final conclusions that we don't actually fully know yet to remain fuzzy, and never allow them to take away that immediate care, that care for your community, for your family, for the people directly around you that you see every day. Because what's happening with the memes, what's happening with memetic concepts now, is that they are helping us divide each other into camps, and they are helping us dehumanize each other. And I do believe that is the end that is the end state of most memetic ideas. Some kind of violence, some kind of scapegoating, division, and that um, anti-memesis is the only way forward. We have to be obscure. Hey, Luke, I was hoping you'd jump in. I hope you watched this from the beginning and criticized me on it. Yeah, because anyway, it's just a concept I'm exploring, anti-memesis, and I'm actually realizing that I have to get on the road. So to the two people who are here and to the several people who popped in and out, um, thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoy this. Yeah, Luke. Yeah, Luke, you go back if you don't mind. You're one of the people that I would actually trust to. Actually, no, I trust anybody to critique the idea, but I particularly feel like there's a resonance that you're on some of the same themes, so you'll know if I went wrong. All right, love you all, and I'm going to end the stream and have a great Friday.